Well, hello and welcome, Ruth. So great to see you.
Thank you. So happy to be here and always great to see you, Liz.
Yes, I cannot wait for this great conversation, especially at this time of year, which I think is really a tender and tenuous time of year as people kind of have come through the first 4 solid weeks of the year and are struggling to keep these new habits and behaviors going. So friends, you guys, we are so honored to welcome Ruth Zukerman to our amazing webinar series. Ruth and I actually are friends and have worked together. But before we were friends, I was a Ruth Zukerman Uber fan. And you may not even know this, but I actually, Katie Couric was a client, and she and I took a summer to try to figure out what would be the exercise that Katie would gravitate towards. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that exercise is something you actually have to find what you love. So we did everything. You name it, we tried it. Everything from Zumba to swimming to running in the park. And then she called and she said, there's a friend of mine who started this cycling place called Flywheel. So for those of you guys who don't know, Ruth Zukerman is the co-founder of both SoulCycle and Flywheel. So I tested it out early days with Katie Couric, and it was life-changing. And those incredibly successful companies were honestly, they were these innovative new classes that changed the boutique fitness industry. So Ruth, you had this bright idea based on your dance background to actually innovate the industry and allow single class purchases. And you just thought outside of the box, and you changed an industry. And it's so exciting for us to have you here today. To talk about, your background and how you empower women. Honestly, that's like your soul, is to empower women to, to tap into their inner strength. Ruth and I met on the board of F45, which is another boutique fitness publicly traded company, and have been friends ever since. So again, that's my long intro for you, but
appreciate it. Thank you.
A lot to say about you. Not only that, you are an author. You have an incredible book, which we'll put in the chat for people who want to read it, called Riding High, all about living the life that you always wanted. So I think it's gonna, after people hear you speak, they'll want to read your book. So
thank you.
Good. So welcome.
I'm very excited to be here and talk about the things that you and I talked about previously, Liz, which is really, how we get through these first few months of the year. And I, for myself, have found it's not easy. And I've definitely had my own moments of struggling and figuring out how to get through those moments. And I've always believed, right from the get-go, when I came up with the idea of starting SoulCycle and Flywheel, I was really just responding to my own needs and my own observations of life. And I recognized early on when I started spinning that it was something that got me through those struggling moments. And I've learned so much through my journey. And I guess one of the points I want to make is that it never ends, right? Our journey continues, our processes continue throughout our lives in terms of learning who we are and what our needs are and where we struggle and how to get through them. And at the end of the day, I like to remind everyone that we're all in it together, and no one, yes, there are degrees of struggle, but there's no judgment, because all these struggling moments are important, and it's important to understand that we do get through them.
Thank you for saying that. That is such a core piece of what Target 100 believes, which is, the weight loss industry and the wellness industry has sold us this crazy bill of goods that there's this one thing, you're going to buy it, you're going to do it, there's going to be a start and then an end, and you're fixed, right? And that there is honestly, it's so untrue, and that this is this wonderful, this wellness journey, to being your best self, to being empowered and tapping into your own inner strength, is such a journey, and it's a beautiful journey when you accept it as that and understand that struggles will come, but there are tools and there are tips and there are ways in which you can learn to weather those storms and those struggles more in a healthier way. So as you see people coming up against, right, so we are in this sort of 4th and 5th week, I do like to make people understand that if you did get started on a journey of, like, maybe you went back to the gym or back to an exercise routine, or you went back to an eating routine that you've been working on, maybe you did dry January and you can't wait for today to be over for you to have a drink, right? Like, this is a really interesting time from the perspective of brain science. There are some hormones and there are actual patterning that is happening for you right now that is making you making it a little bit harder. So as people come through these next 10 days or so, if they can really lock in and pick up the tools that are going to make this next little area, this little struggle patch, easier, what would you say, Ruth, to someone who was, kind of like, oh, I'm having that brain that is telling me to just, oh, don't go to the class. Oh, you can have this. You can have, what are the tools that you tell people are the most important?
I think it's important for us to remind ourselves what it is, and it could be the littlest thing that makes us feel better in a moment. And I'll use myself as an example. And for me, I know that getting on the bike, if I commit to getting on the bike for 40-45 minutes, I know I am going to change my day. I am going to feel so much better. And believe me, I'll wake up sometimes and not feel great emotionally, and I'm not quite sure why, and I can't really figure it out. And then I think, okay, maybe I should get on the bike. And by the way, I might not feel like getting on the bike, but I know intellectually that it works for me. So I use that intellectual knowledge to, not emotional, because if I'm only thinking about emotional, I'm not going to get on that bike because I don't feel like it. I'm feeling down. So I let the intellectual take over and I get over that hump, that decision. I get on the bike, and I am telling you, it never fails because that's what works for me. So at the end of the 40-45 minutes, I'm in a completely different place. And it can be anything. It could be a walk in the park, a walk around the block, just, I think the key is doing something that's just for you.
I love it. You made so many important points there, right? Divorcing from the emotional aspect and the mood aspect, right? Being in touch enough to say my mood is low today, right? That's fine. Emotionally, I don't feel like doing this, but understanding, I think someone said it to me and it changed my life. Emotions are transient. They are transient things that change over time. This too shall pass. And what are those things for you that make that mood shift? So you said another really important piece, which is you've learned to connect to the positive outcome or benefit that comes from ignoring the emotional and stepping on that bike and giving yourself the chance to get through it. So yes. The intellectual piece, I think, is really interesting.
Exactly. Yes. And, we throw around the phrase showing up, right? You have to show up. And I never really fully understood what that meant until I thought back in time when I was going through a very traumatic experience in my life, which was specifically my divorce. And I knew that, once again, going to the gym would help me feel better. And that was my way of showing up. My way of showing up was going through the motions of going to the gym, getting myself there, and then doing something just for me. And that was my showing up. it was taking care of me. I'm just going back to the same theme. But I bring it up just because we hear that a lot. And, there have been many times where I thought, well, what exactly does that mean?
And I love that. I like that you figured it out, for yourself, that showing up for each of us is different, right? That showing up and showing up for yourself into something that does make you feel better, that you can, again, brain science tells us when we connect to not what's happening now, but what the positive outcome or benefit will be to if we can get curious enough, right, to connect to that positive outcome or benefit. It's really powerful. So we're starting to get some comments in the chat, guys. You know this. Please ask questions. I am watching the chat. Please comment, ask questions. We will answer your questions here live. So we have an incredible resource here in Ruth. So I want you to be able to ask what you want to as we kind of navigate through this conversation. I wanted to talk today about resilience, and because that is what's going to get somebody to understand. And I thought, starting from the perspective of your view on what failure means and how transforming that vision of failure can help with resilience.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I always like to qualify that word failure. It's just such a negative word. Immediately, it just brings about negative thoughts. But the truth is that it is those, we know this, Liz, it is those moments, there are those moments of failure that feel like failure that really become learning experiences for us. And it's also those moments of failure that test our resilience, and not only test it, they remind us that, by the way, we have resilience. And again, when we find ourselves in those super low moments, the last thing we think we have is resilience, because we're having those moments of, I don't know if I can get myself out of this, but we always do.
Yeah.
And it's because of resilience. And I always say that resilience for me, and if I'm going to define it, I define it as almost as a muscle. And it's something as humans that we're born with. We all have it. And then it's a question of how many opportunities have we had to use it? Well, certainly many, because we go through our lives with learning experiences that happen through setbacks and through moments that feel like failure. And every time we get through one of those moments, our resilience or our strength builds, right? So that muscle that I call resilience just gets stronger and stronger.
I love it. I love it. And thank you, Jennifer Barth. I see your comment here, and I'm so sorry that you're going through this right now, but it is so, I love what you're talking about for someone like Jennifer, who's, recently laid off in the big tech layoffs, saying, okay, can I think back on the times in my life where I have had what felt like setbacks to me at that moment, and how I got through them, and I'm still here standing. I am still here. And what did I learn, right? That, funny enough, if you look at those things that felt like failures or setbacks in your rearview mirror, you often see that they were exactly what you needed to learn and transform into that next moment that felt like you were home again in your life.
Exactly.
Right. I think it's this lesson in also something of learning that, when you're being tested to be resilient, right? When you're being asked to pick yourself up again, and it feels like, where do I find the strength? It's quite uncomfortable. It's just a discomfort. And it feels like reaching and clawing around in the dark a little bit. But the keeping on going and being able to sit in that discomfort, understanding that that is really where the learning happens, is learning to sit in it without repelling it as a negative. But instead, again, what we know from brain science is, if you will approach it with curiosity, I'm so curious around what happens next. I'm curious around if I did walk out the door and go to the gym this morning, how would that affect the rest of my day? I'm curious if I didn't have that snack after lunch that I've been trying to cut out, would I live till dinner or would I fall over at my desk? Like what would happen? I'm just curious to be in the situation versus where we sometimes go when we're being tested is to say, this is bad and I hate it and it's awful and push it from us versus pulling it into us and allowing us to be in it. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about the fact that, and I don't know if irony is the right word, but it almost is ironic that we could be at one of those super low moments, but then that moment becomes our moment of strength. You know, when the last thing we're feeling is strong. And again, I'm sorry to, I keep going back to my example of divorce,
Yes.
but
Great.
when I had made the decision that I needed to do this, my twin girls were 6 years old, and the three of us had to move out of our home. And when I've told people the story, the first thing they say is, wow, you were really strong. And let me tell you something, back in those days, I never thought of myself as strong. Like I look at them like they have three heads, like, really? Do you think I'm strong? But apparently I must have been to be able to do that. But again, I was feeling so low, but at the same time, I knew it was something I had to do to be true to myself. And I did it.
I love it. I love it. So that becomes a touchstone, right? It becomes a touchstone for you to say, I made it through that. I know I can make it through tough things, right? I know that I come out the other side like a phoenix rising, and I'm going to remember that, whether I felt it or not, that's the reflection. And I can accept that I was strong. I did something that was right for me and my children in that moment. So it becomes a great touchstone. So I love this. I think we're moving away from emotion into intellect to continue to do the things that make you feel good, I think is a huge piece of resilience, right? Being able to say, okay, I am going to take care of myself in this moment, and I am going to prioritize my wellness, even though I may not feel like it, I think is a huge piece. What else would you say gets somebody, what other tools or things would you recommend as you teach around resilience?
Yeah, I would like to answer that by actually I want to comment on one of the comments we had from Anna, who talked about self-compassion.
Mhm.
And I feel that I so agree, Anna. And when I think about self-compassion, self-love, I think about moments where we acknowledge for ourselves hard times that we've been through, or a tough childhood, which caused us to act this way in relationships, whatever it is. And I think sometimes we get stuck because when we're having those feelings or acknowledging those feelings, we think we're being selfish, or we think we're feeling sorry for ourselves. And then it becomes negative. But I think it's so important. And again, these are all things that I've gone through, and I love to share them because the truth is we're not being selfish. Self-love is incredibly important to get us through these moments where we feel stuck. And it's not only okay, it's healthy to like ourselves, to love ourselves, to be proud of ourselves, to acknowledge kind of the map that was laid out for us growing up, which might not have been one that we chose. I just think all of these things are really important things to remind ourselves that, again, going back to what we're saying, Liz, taking moments for yourself, it's healthy, it's important, it's vital.
I love everything that you're saying here. It's, and I do think it is, we get so busy and so wrapped up. And I always think about it from that habit perspective that we habitually, a lot of women follow me, and I'm sure the same. And what I see when I coach women one-to-one or in groups is that their habitual pattern has been to think of everyone else and give that empathy, compassion, love out to everyone else. And then learning to turn that lens back on themselves becomes the most powerful. I mean, it's honestly everything we do at Target 100 is teach you to speak to yourself with love and compassion, to accept yourself where you are while still having goals and challenging yourself to try new things and learn new things, but that right where you are is fantastic too. And so I hope that everyone who listens to this can take a moment to, I mean, think about something of just today that you're proud of, right? Of just in the, in the last, what you've done just to get up in the morning, and how much you give to everyone else, and learn to shine that light back. It really does. When I hear that from people, it feels very, again, uncomfortable, because it's not their habit. Their habit is to give that out to everyone else. So it feels odd to say, I look great today, or I like the way my hair came out today, or, I got out of the bed this morning and I got on the bike, and that was a win for me. And to really identify those things that we've done well. The brain is wired to only identify the things that we have not done or have done poorly. That is our focus. That's the brain is broken, and that's how it works. So you're speaking around a really important habit to build.
Yes. And you just reminded me of something else. But before I say it, I actually was going to comment that your hair looks amazing today.
Thank you. I was thinking the same about yours.
There you go.
It's so funny.
No, I was just going to say the other thing we can always be sure of is that there will always be people out there, maybe friends of yours, friends of mine, family, whomever, who are always going to comment on something that you're doing or you're saying, and it's going to be negative. And that's one of our other biggest challenges, is to not to take those comments and those voices in, because most of the time their comments are coming from their own shortcomings, or if you will, or deficiencies, and it's not about you. And I know that's so hard, and I know it's hard for me, but I always have to remind myself, or take a step back and say, I wonder where that comment came from, instead of taking it on yourself.
Yeah, it's so funny. I have a friend who is 1 year younger than me. And it's funny that whenever our birthdays come up, we have close birthdays. It's almost like clockwork. She has to mention that she's 1 year younger than me. And you're the old lady, right? And I always sit back, and at first it would trigger me, right? And I was like, why is she doing that? And that is it. I'm just giving a silly example of something that used to be like, she got to kind of always every single time point out that I'm older than her. And I was like, not about me, not about me at all. And when you kindly come to that, just those small realizations that most of the time, everything that is coming at you is coming from somewhere that is about that other person, and to stay grounded in your own feelings about yourself and your truth and all those things.
Exactly, because you know what? It's kind of like, bravo to you for being willing to look within and to try to figure all these things out and go through this process, when the reality is that most of those people are not doing the work at all.
Yeah.
So they're just going to throw things back at you because they're not looking at themselves. Yeah. So if anything, again, another reason to say, wow, look at me, at least I'm doing the work.
Yeah, totally. So this sort of resilience mindset, it's something that you can cultivate. It's something that you can, as we say, it's like a muscle that you can continuously work to develop. I was thinking about something that you put at the core of both of the businesses, right? At Flywheel and at SoulCycle was community,
Yes.
and what role community plays in resilience for you.
Yes. Such a huge role. As I said a little earlier, it's all about what brings us so much comfort sometimes is knowing that other people are probably going through the same things that we are. And then once you kind of meet your community, whether it's in an exercise class or at a meeting talking about your nutrition and diet, it doesn't matter. You're finding yourselves with people, with like-minded people, and you all share that commonality, and that's kind of where it starts. And then communities are built from there. And yes, I noticed with SoulCycle in the beginnings and Flywheel that these great communities gradually built and built and built, and we amassed an incredible group of people who had similar interests and shared with each other and went through experiences together. And then I or many of our other instructors were the ones up there kind of reminding everyone, hey, I just went through this today. And then 10 people would line up after class and say, I can't believe you talked about that. I just went through the same thing. And suddenly our issues might not be solved, but it's just so comforting to know that we all share them.
Yes. I do remember that, as that moment of, all those years ago, and why I've built community into every program that I've ever built for myself or anyone else was that, sitting in a room at Weight Watchers all those years ago was the first time, and I was 31, I think, at the time. So I'd been dieting for 30 years and, or about 15 years. I guess I started when I was about 14. So 15 years of reading books and taking that information in and doing it on my own, and literally thinking like something was wrong with me. And then sitting in that room and hearing other people say out loud some of the exact thoughts that I had had about the process, or say to me, hey, you know what? I need to focus on, not eating after dinner this week too. Let's do it together. And I'll see you back here next week, because we had no website or internet back then. I'll see you here next week. And I took that as such a, like, we're doing this together, where there's somebody else. And sometimes accountability and support, again, because we care so much about people, it really means something to us to keep that promise to someone. And what it teaches us is to keep promises to ourselves, or to then foster that integrity with ourselves. So it's the community support, but then it's also this accountability of, I'm sure you saw it, people saying, I'm going to be here on Tuesday morning. Want to meet me here, right?
Exactly. Or, let's go to class together and have a coffee after, make it a twofold event, and I think also, I know that we're talking about community, and we can't not talk about our process of getting through this pandemic and the lockdown, which obviously we all got through quite a while ago, but it's not over. We all know that. And it really has been such a long process in terms of getting back to our communities. And I don't feel that I'm back yet. My practices are still very different and pandemic oriented. And it keeps me somewhat in solitude more than I had been, for sure, pre-pandemic. I don't know if you've noticed that too, Liz.
Absolutely. I think, and again, I think, you spend almost, 2.5, 3 years in something as traumatic and important that will ever happen in many of our lives, right? And it shifted our behavior patterns. And those things, we talk so much about behavior patterns and habit formation. It became our habit to stay home on a Friday night and not put on makeup or go out and make the effort to see a friend. So Friday became this, I'm just using Friday as an example, but it became this sort of like, I snuggle in and I do this. And we do, if you do anything repeatedly, it becomes what the brain craves. So it's very hard to say, and it's very similar to going to the gym of like, oh, now I'm after a long work week, I'm going to throw my makeup on and put a cute little outfit on and meet somebody out and go through all the effort to come out on the other side where you did with the gym class, right? With the spin class or the bike is, oh, I'm so glad I did that. It was so great to see her. I had this social interaction. I feel alive. But that front portion is that discomfort piece. And many of us now are entrenched in habitual patterns. So nothing's wrong with us. We just created habitual patterning. And now it's up to us to systematically choose where and how we will be undoing some of those and leaving the ones that are serving us. Because some of that is, I think I don't ever want to go back to some of the running around that I was doing. But, even in my life, all of a sudden, a lot of speaking events and, events, like large scale, conferences and things like that are coming up. And I'm being very selective about the ones that I will travel to and when I travel. Whereas before it was just like, oh, I just go. Like, I don't think, I just do. So I think those, really thinking about where do I want to see myself challenging the habitual patterns, and not falling prey to that isolation, which I think is so difficult to do when it really feels like the thing, sort of just like staying in bed instead of going to the spin bike. It at that moment really honestly feels like what we should do. The brain says, no, this is the pattern and this, you're so comfortable here and let's not break out of it. That, I think, when we think of a resilience mindset, is learning that that's the brain's trick, is to keep us stuck, to hopefully keep us not changing and not moving forward, and really saying like, this is important to me. I hear it. I understand it. I am going to put the shoes on and walk out the door. I am going to make the plan with the friend, and working towards that.
Yeah, that is so interesting, Liz. And I was just playing that out in terms of my own behavior in my brain. And I was thinking about the fact that, again, we're talking about these first few months of the year and it's winter, at least in New York, it's winter and it's cold out. And so if I have the choice, I could go out, I could call a friend, or I could stay home and find a really great movie on Netflix. The reality is, because of the pandemic, our brains were trained, and I'm really good at planning a night home by myself, watching some great movie like I did the other night with Philip Seymour Hoffman. I mean, who doesn't want to watch PSH? And so, yeah, like we've gotten good at staying home, right? And it would be much different if we never had the pandemic.
Yes, very different, right? So we think about that in all of our lives, right? In anything that we're trying to change. This is, I always am so passionate about habit formation, and thank you, Jennifer, for writing that down, right? Whatever we habitually do, right? Whatever we repeatedly do, the brain begins to crave it no matter what it is. Right. So if we are, going to the gym repeatedly, we actually begin to actually crave it. But you have to do the repetition piece enough for it to become the thing that the brain craves. So, and anything that you choose to repeatedly do will become that thing. So I think it's that navigation around, it is very valid to stay home and have a movie night for sure. But are you in that space where you are feeling isolated or alone? And can you challenge yourself to break out and go back and find that balance for yourself? Because community, is so important. Social interaction and that ability to grow and learn is going to be so important. But each one of those things, and I'm thankful, Jennifer, that you allowed us to know what's happening for you. Even for Jennifer, she went from one pattern of, she probably had to wake up at a certain time every day, either go to an office or get on Zoom. She had responsibilities and things like that. Sort of like the pandemic, overnight, those things changed. And so she's sitting with a blank canvas And I always say to people, take the opportunity to go in and say, okay, so these are the things that I am going to do repeatedly on this blank canvas, and build those patterns in that are healthy for me, and just repeatedly do what I can.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we've got this idea around, community, accountability, um, learning to do things for yourself, that are important and bring you joy and connect you to yourself. Um, you have had you have had an incredible career, and you've had many moments. I think that's why you wrote your book. It was to tell people that you've had to overcome massive disappointments, setbacks,
Yes.
even in your professional career. How did you untangle from those moments in your life?
A lot of how I did it was knowing what I enjoyed doing, knowing how I enjoyed spending my time. When I was 22, after I graduated college, I pursued my dream to be a professional dancer. It didn't work out. And I made the very difficult decision to give it up. And it was literally a dream of mine since I had been 8 years old. And it was a very difficult decision. And I call that one of my first kind of fish out of water moments, where I had no idea what I was going to do next.
Yeah.
What I did know, this is just, I hope, a good example. What I did know was that I was so used to being physical, which was something I really enjoyed. So for the first time, I had to think about exercise because I wasn't taking dance classes anymore. And so I decided to try a dance aerobics class. We're talking 1980s, in my neighborhood on the Upper West Side. And I built up the courage to walk in there. I didn't know anybody. And I started taking aerobics classes there. And little did I know that that was going to be the start of kind of my master's work in group exercise. I mean, I didn't know that that was going to contribute to the career of my life. So you just never know. But again, Liz, we're getting back to the same theme, which is showing up, taking a step, getting yourself out there. Maybe sometimes that's the only way we're going to figure out what we like to do and figure out how we want to spend our time. But we do it. And again, that was a super low moment in my life where I just had no idea what was going to be next.
Yeah.
But look what happened.
Yeah. It's so similar. I find it so crazy because I was a professional actress. And when I stopped acting, I'd struggled with my weight my whole life, but I put on a lot of weight, and I took the action to go to Weight Watchers, which was not to get a new career, but it was an action that I took, and I sat in that room. It changed my life, and I went from there. So I think it's that idea of saying, I am going to try things. I am going to experiment. I am going, and you said something so important, which is, I'm going to think about what I like, what matters to me. And I tell this to my children. I have an 18-year-old who's, applying to colleges and getting ready to go to college. And I just keep saying to him is just go somewhere that you like and do something that you like, just because you'll be successful in that, and keep moving towards those things. And I think in our wellness life, and our, even like at Target 100, that's what we're constantly trying to teach you is stop doing things that you think you should, or that others said you should be doing. Instead, be experimenting with things that you like, foods that you like. How do I get to have cheeseburgers back in my life and still get the weight loss or the wellness that I'm looking for? How do I continuously work towards something that makes me happy? And that place becomes where you thrive and where you shine.
Exactly. And the odds are in many of those situations, they're a bit risky, right? Like you kind of feel like, well, I don't know anyone. I don't know if I want to do that. And so it's important to accept that it is a little risky. And again, to remind yourself, you know what, if I take that risk, I bet it's going to be worthwhile, because it always is. I thought, as you were talking, Liz, I thought of another example, which was, again, a moment where I had no idea, I had no direction in my life. And I remember it might have even been my mother. I was well out of college and definitely an adult. And I think my mother might have said, oh, why don't you take a course? And I immediately got annoyed. It was like, I don't want to take a course, probably because it was my mother. However, then I sat and thought about it, and I thought, okay, well, if I did take a course, what would I be interested in? And I decided to take a course in writing, in memoir writing. Again, never in a million years did I ever imagine writing a book. This was way before that. And I took the course. Again, it was kind of intimate. It was about 8 of us. I didn't know anyone in the room, and it's a memoir writing course. So we're really talking about the nitty-gritty of our lives. But I took the course and I learned so much, and it really ended up helping me.
Yes, I love it. And something you don't know why you're doing it, but you're doing it and you're allowing yourself to experience it and grow through it. And then you did write a book. It's called Riding High: How I Kissed SoulCycle Goodbye, Co-Founded Flywheel, and Built the Life I Always Wanted. And that was published in 2018. And, that was not an easy transition either. The end of SoulCycle, it was personally and professionally difficult for you, right?
It was, I'll take it a step further. It was definitely the sequence of events that happened became a trauma in my life. To this day, it still is. I still have nightmares about what happened, and actually have accepted the fact that it's a trauma and will always be there. The question is, how do I handle it and get through it? It's not necessarily going to go away. It'll always be part of me, but it won't define me. But yes, I suddenly, out of the blue, found out I was no longer going to be a partner in a business that never would have started without me. And boy, was that tough. However, I went ahead and I started Flywheel, and I had many people come to me and say, wow, like after what happened to you at SoulCycle, how could you go out and start another spin business? And I never really fully understood the question, because my response was always, how could I not? Like this opportunity, which was my passion, was taken away from me. This is what I do. Comes from my heart. How could I not do it again? Because I need to be doing this. So yes.
I love it. I'm just putting the name of your book in.
Oh, thank you. But yes, talk about resilience. Again, I seem to have found it. Yeah. It's the resilience that allowed me to take another stab at it and succeed.
Well, and I think about all the times that I've gotten the opportunity to be in a room with you speaking, or we've done several of these opportunities together. There's something really beautiful about your vulnerability that I think I keep thinking that has to be part of resilience as well, is the vulnerability that you bring to the table of really telling it like it is,
Yes, absolutely. And it's the vulnerability that I discovered that allows you to connect with other people. It's when people allow themselves to be vulnerable with each other, that's when they really connect. That's when a bond is formed. And kind of the flip side of that, Liz, is people, and we all know many people in our lives who can't go there, and they are not willing to be vulnerable. And the truth is, if you think about it, those people are not very compelling. They're not very interesting. What's interesting is when people are willing to share.
And that's something. I have these funny little sayings, these little words of wisdom, and we're constantly asking people, like, people who refuse to be vulnerable, I often have learned, are really trying to appear as if they've got it all figured out and they're perfect. And I love that you said those folks aren't very compelling, because I always felt that, like, a lot of us, especially when it comes to our wellness and our weight loss, we feel like we need to be perfect and we have to do things perfectly. And I always say, like, I don't even want to know perfect people. I don't want to even know how boring. There's nothing to
So
hear
true.
about, right? Whereas like hearing your story, and you write all about your story in your book about what happened. And I think that, it's just such a compelling and vulnerable, thing to talk about what really occurred and how you really felt about it. I think you can't really process through anything, from the smallest to the biggest things that happen to us without really being vulnerable and being honest about how you feel about it. And I think a lot of us have put bricks in the wall, to just be like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine, and really letting yourself go there, because again, emotions are transient, but they can't move without being accepted and felt, and then they can move on, right?
Exactly.
Acknowledged.
Exactly. And I will take that a step further and say that through my path and my process and my discovery that being vulnerable with others is actually inspiring and helpful, you might find that you develop a whole new community and a whole new group of friends. I know that when I again went through my divorce, when I was married, we had our set of friends, and all of that changed from the moment I left the marriage. Those people no longer wanted to be my friend. And maybe it was just as well because I changed too. And I ended up gravitating toward different kinds of people. And again, I'm talking about people who were also willing to be vulnerable and willing to share.
It's such a great point, and even if we take this into that health and wellness space, I mean, I see this with people all the time who actually begin to really take care of themselves and behave differently. They often, a side product of this is that they have to have some changing relationships, because they start to recognize that the people that they were associating with were not in the same space, and they weren't helping this situation, right? And they didn't have as much in common anymore. If you didn't want to go out drinking, or overeating, or not exercising, and now all of a sudden they're like, oh, I love this lady that that I met in my spin class, and now we're having coffee together, and she's working towards this in her life. That's why, I mean, again, community, when you're thinking through resilience, community is that key of like-minded people that we've definitely created here at Target 100, right? Is like everybody here is bettering themselves and working on themselves in ways that are making them happier people. And they may notice that those circles have to change for them to grow.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Yeah. You have a question here. Do you think there's a difference, I think this probably means resilience for women versus men?
Yes, she wrote resilience.
Or difference for resilience for women versus men. I work with so many females, and we are more emotionally driven, is what I find, than men. They can compartmentalize. That's a generalization, and I hate generalizations. So I can speak only to the myself and many of the people that I've worked with. That I think some of the tools that we're talking about are so important, especially for women, because we do drive from an emotional place often, and beginning to understand and navigate those emotions so that we can move through them to the intellectual. Whereas I often see men being very able to move to that space very quickly, and let go of that emotional piece. That's all I can say anecdotally, from years of working with women.
I would agree with you, Liz. I think that's a great way to explain it too. They kind of jump over the emotional struggles that we go through to get there, and they just go directly there, right? And as a woman, I'm sure a lot of women find themselves thinking, I wish I could do that. That looks a
Oh, yeah,
lot
totally.
easier, but we can't.
Yeah, no, we can't. But we can learn to sit in, work on, and be vulnerable around that emotional response as well. So I think we've really touched on that pushing through to that intellectual space, the reliance on community, that resilience is a muscle, and we should be reflecting on the things that we have done that we are proud of, and looking back to those times, right? You said this, like, look back to those times, whether it was a difficult childhood, you got through that too. You did, and you did it in some way that was unique to you.
Yes. And I always like to tell everyone whenever I have the opportunity to talk about my career and my story, that again, coming back to all of these moments of resilience, I started SoulCycle when I was 48 years old, and I started Flywheel when I was 52. And I always get a gasp from someone in the audience when I say that. But I love to share that because they are two examples of how this resilience thing is something that comes up for us throughout the course of our lives, and it's there for us when we have those moments. And we're not talking about formulating a career after college, and then if you're out of that career, well, you're shit out of luck, because that's not reality. It's our process goes on for the rest of our lives, and we can, with the resilience, go from one career to another. And, certainly as women in this day and age, we have a lot of opportunities that open up for us, and we're never too old.
Yeah, never too old. And I think you just gave us another really good thing for people to take away from this is limiting beliefs.
Yes.
We talk about them at Target 100 all the time, but they're these shadows that live over us, right? And you probably had to battle those yourself. I'm battling them daily. Limiting beliefs. I'm in menopause. Can I maintain my weight loss? I'm now 52. What's possible for me, right? Like, those things are constantly there, but hearing them and learning to kind of quiet that voice and move forward is so powerful as a resilience strategy, is being able to hear it and be like, well, okay, let me seek some actual data here. Oh yeah, there are plenty of women out there who are navigating menopause and sustaining healthy lives, healthy weights. You can be one of those people. Why don't you navigate towards those people? Again, that community for you is going to be powerful, right? So using all the skills that we're talking about here today are going to be so important. But hearing the limiting beliefs and then seeking some sort of proof that that really isn't true, and it certainly doesn't need to be true for you.
Exactly. And I'm going to exercise the whole community theme here right now, because I feel that typically I'm always the oldest one in the group. So I'm just going to assume I'm the oldest one here and tell you, Liz, and everybody else going through menopause, that there is a light at the end of that tunnel. And let me tell you something, when I was going through it, I'll never forget, I was probably around 52-ish, around there. And I was at Flywheel, and at Flywheel, our employee community were all these young instructors with amazing bodies. And there I was, 52, with a good extra 10 pounds on me, which stayed on throughout my perimenopause phase. And it was not easy. And I got through it, as all of you will, and the 10 pounds came off and I felt great. So there is a light at the end of that tunnel.
That's so awesome. I want to say this anecdotally again, because now we're on such a great topic. We could do an hour on this topic.
Yes, for sure.
I had my checkup, my sort of well checkup with my doctor the other day and was talking about, just being in this career and now learning all about menopause and the hormonal changes, and that I too was like navigating through this sort of 5 to 7 pounds that I've been working to try to stay in that range, right? Because we all live in a range. And she's like, listen, what I'm seeing from women is that there's like this little bit of this change that occurs for something around 5 to 7 years. She said, but what's so interesting is then it comes off on the other side. And you're sort of anecdotally saying the same thing, is that then it wasn't a lot of change, but she said, just stay doing what you're doing. If there's a few extra pounds on you right now, she's like, at the other end of it, it does come off.
Exactly. And it is hard when you're in it, and it's hard to accept it.
Yeah.
Maybe that would help a little bit, knowing that it changes and you get back to a great self.
I just wanted to make sure, Jennifer had asked, is there a way to leverage the emotional cornerstone for good, as opposed to thinking it's a hindrance that adds steps to our journey? And I was going to say, I love my emotions and my emotional response. I would never want you to think of it as a hindrance. It is part of who I am, but I want to work through it versus, letting it control me and my actions. So I like to move to the intellectual when I intellectually know that, taking an action will be good for me. So I would never want you to come away from this conversation thinking that our emotional livelihood and part of us is bad or a hindrance in any way, shape, or form. No, I think it's very, very important for us to honor it. And I think that most of us are not kind of sitting in it, allowing ourselves to have that emotional response, accepting it, and moving through it, I think is another part of this.
I think that's such an important point. And I will take it one step further, because this is a question that often gets asked to me when I do a speaking engagement. Whenever I get to the part about what happened at SoulCycle and talk about the fact that it was a trauma, I have had people say to me, how did you get through that at the time? And I answer very honestly, and I say that I don't think I could have without the help of my therapist. And I think taking that step to talk to a therapist is really important when you find that you can't deal with the emotions yourself, because sometimes they get overwhelming and you do need that extra voice, that third party to help you get through it. So I completely agree with you that acknowledging the emotions and sitting with them, and even though it's so uncomfortable, is really important, and to see what you can get through yourself. But you might have a situation where you need that extra help, so don't be afraid to ask for it.
Absolutely. I love that you said that. It's those at very, very important critical moments of my life, right? That third person, or, that person coming outside of you and giving you perspective. It's just like, wow, we can't settle some of this stuff on our own inside of our own heads. So it's so helpful. Well, so this has been fascinating. I can see that everyone's so loving this conversation. We'll have to have you back, and we'll just position the whole thing around menopause.
So many topics
We could talk about, but thank you for being here. I know that, I want to make sure people can follow you. I've put the name of your book is Riding High. Guys, get it. You will not be sorry. It will continue this conversation. Also, where can they find you on, social, where?
I'm on Instagram. Facebook, I'm on, but I don't use it that much. Probably Instagram would be the best.
Great.
And if you type my name in, you'll find my handle, because I never remember it.
Yeah. So, but remember how you have an interesting spelling name like mine.
Yes.
Right?
There's no C in Zukerman. It's Zukerman.
Yeah. So when you're looking her up, don't put a C in there. So
Thank you.
Thank you for spending this time with us. I can tell that it really resonated for all of my folks and beyond. So appreciate you so much. And I hope you have a beautiful day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.